Recollection Road is proud to partner with Legacy Box. Watch until the end of this video to find out more about digitizing your family's irreplaceable memories, and then visit legacybox.com/recollection for an incredible 55% off. The iron was typically made of cast iron and had a flat base for pressing clothes. To heat the iron, it was placed on a stove or a charcoal heater until it reached the desired temperature. There were also some electrical irons at this time that you could plug in to a light socket. You could then iron your clothes by applying pressure to remove wrinkles and creases. The ironing board was also pretty simple and was usually a foldable surface made of wood which you could lay your clothes across for ironing. Electric toasters were starting to gain popularity during the 1920s. They consisted of two metal heating elements, one on each side, into which slices of bread could be placed. You would manually push down bread into the toaster, and the heating elements would toast the bread evenly on both sides. Once toasting was complete, the bread would pop up due to a spring mechanism. Telephones in the 1920s were mostly rotary dial phones. When making a call, the user would pick up the handset and listen for a dial tone. To dial a number, they would insert their finger into a rotating dial, corresponding to the desired number, and rotate it until it reached the finger stop. The dial then returned to its original position, signaling the number to the central exchange. In the 1920s, safety razors were commonly used for shaving. These razors had a protective guard that shielded most of the blade, reducing the risk of cuts. You simply inserted a double-edged razor blade into the razor head, and then you could shave by running the razor across the skin. Bathing suits during the 1920s were typically made of wool, which was heavy and didn't dry quickly. Women's bathing suits covered most of the body, some with long skirts, which were very modest. Men's bathing suits were a little more revealing, but still covered much of the body compared to modern swimwear. Cars in the 1920s were powered by an internal combustion engine and fueled with gasoline. They had a basic manual transmission system, which required the driver to shift gears manually using a clutch. Cars had mechanical brakes operated by foot pedals and often had wooden or metal bodies mounted onto a steel frame. Refrigerators during this time were basically just ice boxes. They were insulated wooden or metal cabinets that held large blocks of ice to keep the interior cool. As the ice melted, a drip pan would collect the water, which needed to be emptied on a regular basis. The ice had to be replenished daily to maintain the cooler temperature that kept food fresh. Phonographs and gramophones were the primary music players in the 1920s. They used hand-cranked mechanisms to rotate a turntable. A needle attached to the tone arm would then make contact with the record's grooves, amplifying the sound through a large horn-shaped speaker. Cameras in the 1920s were analog devices and used film for capturing images. They had basic manual controls that focused the lenses and adjusted the exposure. The photographer would load a roll of film into the camera, and after taking photos, they would then need to have the film developed to see the pictures. Strollers in the 20s were pretty basic and had large wheels that helped with maneuverability. They were often made of wood or metal and had fabric seats for the baby. These strollers had no advanced features like reclining seats or shock absorption, so the child would get quite jostled around while on a walk. Football helmets from this time period don't compare at all to modern helmets. This early protective headwear was made of leather and provided really limited protection. Players wore them mainly to protect against cuts and bruises, rather than any significant head impacts. The US dollar bill during the 1920s had a similar design to today's currency, but some were considered certificates and had larger sizes, while others were banknotes that were issued by national banks and featured different portraits of historical figures. These were still paper notes that represented a specific denomination of money and could be used as a form of payment, just like coins from the era. By the 1920s, American building codes required indoor bathrooms in all new single-family residential construction, so outhouses were replaced with toilets that used a flushing mechanism, but they were not as efficient as modern toilets. They required gravity and more water per flush, and they often had a pull chain or handle that released water into the bowl. The tanks were sometimes set higher than what we are used to, which helped to provide the toilet with more force, but some models were tankless and used a pressure valve to provide the water power. Flashlights in the 1920s had become essential tools for any household. There were basically two styles, the tubular handheld one and a lantern version. They both used incandescent bulbs and were powered by batteries, both of which were considerably weaker than what we're used to today. Some flashlights still flickered or flashed, as the name flashlight suggests, but over time they became more reliable. Toilet paper during the 1920s was, believe it or not, available in rolls, similar to today. Led by the Scott Company, rolls of toilet paper were first used by the wealthy, while people without the means may have used pages from the latest Sears Roebuck catalog to freshen up. The paper was typically made of low-quality paper and was not the soft, modern toilet paper we now know. Charmin, however, would be introduced in 1928, bringing soft-touch toilet paper to the masses. Calculators during the 1920s were primarily just a mechanical device. They often used gears and dials for numerical computation, and if you had a complex calculation, it still required a much more manual effort. These machines looked a lot like cash registers, and they were sometimes called adding machines. It would be some time before the computing power was increased, and the size of these machines decreased to resemble the calculators of today. Vacuum cleaners in the 1920s were becoming a much more common appliance in the home, but they were usually large and quite heavy machines. Hoover was at the forefront of making them so popular, following World War I. They introduced an aluminum body, an on-off switch, and an agitator brush that cleaned carpets better. The vacuum was one of the many new devices marketed in the 1920s that promised to liberate middle-class women from the drudgery of housework. Blenders, as we know them today, got their start in 1922, when Stephen Poplawski devised a machine for making malts and milkshakes for soda fountains. The concept of blending or mixing ingredients manually was still prevalent, and people found that with a blender they could save time and mix things up better than if they used a hand-operated mixer. Hamilton Beach would go on to develop their own version that worked to improve the design made famous by Poplawski. Overall, technology has come a long way since the 1920s, and these objects have undergone significant advancements to become more efficient and convenient tools that make our lives better every single day. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything, and maybe even consider supporting the channel over on Patreon. Recollection Road and Legacy Box both believe it's important to preserve the past. If you're like me, there's a box of your family's treasured home movies and photos tucked away somewhere, and Legacy Box can help you preserve them digitally. The process is a simple and safe solution for converting your home movies and photos to thumb drive or to the cloud. Just send in your Legacy Box filled with old VHS and camcorder tapes, film reels, and pictures, and get back digital copies that can be easily enjoyed, shared, and kept organized. It's that easy. Legacy Box is trusted by over 1 million people, and it's all done right here in the USA. Get started preserving your past today. Go to legacybox.com/recollection to get an incredible 55% off. Buy today to take advantage of this exclusive offer and send in your memories when you're ready. Go to legacybox.com/recollection to save 55% while supplies last. If you enjoyed this video, consider watching this playlist, and then visit the channel to search the Recollection Road library. As always, thank you so much for watching.